We acknowledge in Milwaukee that we are on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homeland along the southwest shores of Michigami, North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnick rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Water is the most life-sustaining gift on Mother Earth and is the interconnection among all living beings. Water sustains us, flows between us, within us, and replenishes us. All life requires water, and yet there is not equitable access to our shared common waters. My name is JoAnna. I am a queer Latina from Milwaukee. I am a first-generation Wisconsinite. In the 60s, my grandmother migrated here from Texas to work in Wisconsin's agricultural fields. I was raised in the near South Side in a working class family by a single mom who often worked 2 jobs to support me and my siblings. My parents separated when I was 8. This talk is based off my reflections, insights, and firsthand experiences growing up in a city that is known to be the most racially segregated metro area in the country. Growing up on the South Side, we never really left the South Side. School, work, the doctor, other family members, the park, it was all on the South Side. It felt like we stayed in this radius between National Avenue and Lincoln Avenue, First Street and 35th Street. We never left the area. I think this was for a combination of things. My mom working 2 jobs meant we would be alone a lot of the time. So we went to the park that was across the street. And when she was home, we did things that needed to be done. Laundry, clean the house, grocery shop. And because the South Side had people that looked like us, it seemed that is where we belonged. I remember being young and my Aunt Nana, my mom's older sister, who never had any children of her own, would sign me, my brother, and my cousins up for swim classes through MPS Rec. We would all go to South Division High School on Saturday mornings for our swim classes. The swim classes always had a white swim instructor, and me and my brother and cousins were often the only brown kids. I also remember the day my mom left my dad. She took us from the house, and the first place we went was to the lake. We never went to the lakefront. In fact, we were there so infrequently, I used to call it the water by the rocks because of the boulders that make up part of the shoreline along Lake Michigan. I never even knew until I was older there was a beach there. Bradford Beach and McKinley Beach could have been in a different country for all I knew. Being at the water by the rocks felt like being in another world. It was so beautiful, looking to the distance to see where the water met the sky. The Little Mermaid fan in me wished I could just jump in the water and swim away. But beyond the beauty of this enormous body of water, the other thing I would notice was that the people there were majority white folks. My mom moved us around a handful of times after we left my dad, always staying on the South Side, just a different block. I remember being in one house and turning on the bathroom water and it coming out brown. I didn't freak out. A few seconds later, it turned clear, and I carried on with brushing my teeth and washing my hands. For a single mom with 4 children, we didn't take fancy vacations, but we would one weekend every summer go to Wisconsin Dells and we would go to Noah's Ark. And that's really where I would swim. We didn't have a neighborhood pool. The park across the street had a wading pool, right? That only came up to my ankles, that the water level only came up to my ankles. Um, and then I remember one summer, my mom packed us up and we drove to Texas to visit family. We were in Corpus Christi and my uncle took us to the Gulf of Mexico. We all got in the water and I remember he swam out pretty far for me. And my mom told us we couldn't follow him. We don't know what was in that water. So we stayed close to the shoreline, never letting the water go higher than our waist. As a teenager, not much changed. I stayed in the South Side. Occasionally, my friends and I would take a cruise to the lakefront. And again, we would note the majority of white people who were there playing volleyball, jet skiing, tanning, fishing, preparing to take out their boats. All these activities that felt foreign to me. And we hardly ever got out of the car. We would just look at the people and the water as we drove by. This was my relationship and understanding of water. When you are poor, sometimes water is brown. Beaches and lake fronts are not in the hood. You can visit large bodies of water, but you don't actually belong or know what you are doing when you are there. And you have to drive almost 2 hours to swim in a nice swimming pool. As I got older, I never questioned my relationship with water. I learned how historically our waterways in Milwaukee had been very industrialized. Water is foundational to the city, and it is at the root of the lives of the many people who have lived here. Native Americans recognized its importance by respecting its bounty and power. It also served as a means of transportation and cultural transference, facilitating trade and diplomacy among local tribes. And eventually, the Great Lakes later brought European colonizers into contact with these Indian communities in the 17th century. The European colonizers were attracted to our Great Lakes because of their potential for economic growth. Fur traders regarded these communities as hubs of commercial activity and trade. As the city developed into a major hub of Great Lakes commerce in the 19th century, the Milwaukee River became vital to growing industries. In 1849, there was a small brewing industry that transformed into a large brewing industry, and the riverfront became a means to transport beer and take in deliveries for local breweries. In fact, Frederick Pabst, the founder of Pabst Brewing Company, purchased a dock for the company on the river to expedite transactions and account for deliveries more efficiently for his brewery. The tanning industry also utilized the river for both leather production and shipping. Leather companies took advantage of the river water for chemical production purposes and then sent finished leather products downriver to the railroad depot and port for shipping. Another industry that capitalized on the river for access to markets was wheat production. Before Wisconsin was the dairy farm, we farmed wheat, and grain mills sprouted up along the riverfront in the city as mills used water power to process wheat into flour. And on the city's south side near Walker's Point, meat packing plants sprung up all along the Menominee and Kinnickinnic rivers. Milwaukee's meatpacking industries took advantage of their proximity to the river, using it to transport butchered products to ships and port while polluting its waters with animal waste. Milwaukee's fast industrialization and urbanization in the late 19th century came with devastating environmental consequences for the river. It essentially became a dumping ground for tanners, brewers, mills, meat packing plants, and manufacturers. So I considered it normal that poor communities and communities of color would not have access to our waterways. Waterways were meant to support capitalism, and depending on your level, your class level, it could be for recreation. So my background is in community organizing and local politics. I have volunteered and worked for nonprofits and political candidates for over a decade. My work has always centered social justice and reproductive rights, access to the voting process, combating the attacks on a fair democracy, immigration, livable wages, and other barriers that prevented my community from thriving. I knew environmental justice was a huge part of the social justice movement I'm part of. I saw folks working to combat climate control and create access to safe water. But when you are working with communities that are locked out of the housing system, can't afford or access healthcare, and are being separated from their families, the green environment seemed like something that could be on the back burner. Besides, the environmentalists I saw working or the legislators drafting climate bills were all white people, so I always assumed they had it under control. It wasn't until my 30s when I was asked by a dear friend and mentor, Brenda Coley, to join the board of the Milwaukee Water Commons did I start to think about environmental issues and water justice. I remember when Brenda and I met and she asked me to be part of the board. I said, Brenda, I don't know anything about water except that I like to drink it. She reminded me that what I knew was valuable. I knew about social justice and how to stand up for my community. She told me secure water access is a fundamental human right. Safe, reliable, and equitable water access is critical to the health and livelihoods of Black and Brown folks. And that if we wanted an equitable and inclusive Milwaukee, that it included the use of our waterfronts. Milwaukee sits on the shore of the world's largest freshwater body. Yet, many of our Black and Brown children have never seen Lake Michigan. And she was right. And I knew that because of my own lived experience. As a model water city, we have a moral obligation to ensure every child can experience our lakes and rivers. Many cities across the US are already facilitating free swimming lessons for every child. As a model water city, why aren't we? A recent report by the USA Swimming Foundation and the University of Memphis reported that 64% of Black children across the country cannot swim. Milwaukee is nearly 40% Black. What are we doing to change that? Learning to swim can mean the difference between life and death. Milwaukee Water Commons' mission is to foster connection, collaboration, and broad community leadership on behalf of our common waters, to promote stewardship of equitable access to and shared decision-making for our common waters. Their vision is Milwaukee is a model water city where we all have a stake in the health of our waters and all share in their stewardship as well as their benefits. We all deserve meaningful water experiences. As a board member for the Milwaukee Water Commons, one of my favorite memories is supporting the work of our annual event, Cream City Classic, which has been on hold because of this global pandemic we're all in. But the event was to welcome swimmers into the Milwaukee River. What a beautiful thing to have folks jump in our river, feel safe, swim, and have fun. The event celebrates the work that is done to keep our waterways clean. It celebrates the progress we have made. As Brenda says, it's not to celebrate perfection, but to celebrate progress, because we still have work to do. In 2019, we had almost 100 swimmers jump in the water. In fact, there was a couple who traveled all the way from Madrid to swim in our Milwaukee River. They came from Spain, y'all. It was a transformative moment, whether you were swimming or on the side watching the swimmers. But what stood out to me the most was I could count the number of swimmers that were people of color on one hand. Swimmable, drinkable, fishable water. I'm a first-time homebuyer. I purchased a home last May in the same community I grew up in. What can I say? I'm a Southsider. My house was built in 1906. When I got the inspection on my home, I was told I have a lead lateral pipe. All the people who live in homes built prior to the 1960s fear that their drinking water may be dangerous, and they're not wrong. According to the Wisconsin Medical Journal, there are approximately 70,000 residential lead pipes located throughout Milwaukee that deliver unsafe drinking water to primarily Black and Latinx communities. For being a water city, Milwaukee is seriously behind in securing safe drinking water. Lead water pipes represent a public health threat to thousands of families. And it was not until 2017 that action was finally started towards replacing these lead pipes. But as of 2020, approximately only 2,000 pipes have been replaced. That puts us significantly behind the Milwaukee Water Works goal. This is not good. According to the City of Milwaukee 2020 budget and brief, it will take roughly 70 years to replace all lead pipes in the city. Lead poisoning is a health problem that can affect generations of Black and Latinx communities due to the lack of upward housing mobility opportunities, which bars families like mine from escaping these hazardous conditions and perpetuates intergenerational inequity. Milwaukee declared racism a public health crisis in 2019. I'd say the time to address these issues of systemic racism is now. We can't afford to wait.